so much for attending. I do see that there are some participants that are coming in, so we will go ahead and start this off. I just wanted to make sure that I let everyone know about a couple of housekeeping items. One, that this is going to be recorded. So with that being said, we will be providing the recording to all of the registrants, but this will be made available to the public. So just letting everyone know about that. The other item is that we do have the ability to have any kind of questions be submitted during the presentation. Of course, questions will be asked to the panelists at the end of their presentation. So feel free to send those in during the presentation, and when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll go ahead and address any of those questions. But with that, I am very thankful to have the City of Cibolo's HR Manager, Kristen Hetzel here, as well as our guest speaker, Ms. Adelita Cavada with Adelita Cavada Law. It's very nice of you to take the time out of your day to work with the City of Cibolo and the businesses that are participating and viewing this to answer any of the questions that they may have and provide a lot of the insight into HR laws and kind of the changes that COVID is bringing with employment. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Kristen Hetzel with the City of Cibolo.
Thank you so much, Dustin. I do want to give everybody a heads up. We are stationed out of a fire station, and so sometimes I do have alarms and loud noises in the background, and I apologize if there's any disruptions because of that. Can everyone hear us all right? I can tell by the cheers you can. Awesome. So we are going to start today with attorney Adelita Cavada from Adelita Cavada Law. Her law firm focuses on small businesses and consumer reorganization under the bankruptcy code. And she has a lot of wonderful information that helps when it comes to COVID and your business. She has a law degree from St. Mary's and a master's degree from St. Mary's, and she has been very helpful. So we're going to start off with COVID and employment. We're trying to touch a few topics today, including a short, quick legal review, items you should be familiar with. If you're not, please let us know. What to do about your employees when they're sick, and then a little bit of a miscellaneous after that. So let's start off with the legal review.
Well, first, good morning, everybody. I was very excited to be invited to give this presentation today with Kristen and Cibolo. I will give my disclaimer. This is not legal advice. Nothing in today's presentation by me should be considered legal advice. If you have any legal questions, please be sure to consult an attorney. You can always reach out to me. My email will be provided at the end of the slides. I feel that today should be really informal. We do encourage questions specific to you and your business are encouraged. And then any questions you may have regarding COVID and small businesses in general, please feel free to shoot them at us. And with that, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have Kristen and I kind of do a question and answer back and forth. And then when you have questions, throw them at us and we'll be happy to tackle them.
So let's start with the American with Disabilities Act. So this act applies to any private employer who has 15 or more employees. And this is one that falls in line with the Rehabilitation Act. So when we're talking about reasonable accommodation, this is a few of the acts that we're majorly going to look at. And accommodation is something that may be required during COVID. We're all having to be very flexible during this pandemic.
Yeah, we're going to throw a lot of these legal terms at you, and they do get very confusing. So if you have a question, let us know. If we say something that maybe doesn't sound right, please let us know. Or if you need something clarified, definitely let us know. But we're going to refer to the Americans with Disabilities Act and maybe the Rehabilitation Act, but most likely we're going to say reasonable accommodation, right? So keep that word in mind, accommodation. So go ahead, Chris.
Things that we would be accommodating for is anything that is covered under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. When we say Title VII, we're talking about these protected terms, these protected items, all the way through sexual orientation, which is the most recently added item.
For the state of Texas.
For the state of Texas. Well, okay. There was a whole thing recently about it. It was very exciting, but yeah, state of Texas now covers sexual orientation as a protected class, including age discrimination. So employees over 40, we need to make sure we're prohibit discrimination against that. We're going to talk a little bit about the GINA Act. So that's the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And why would we talk about genetic information? Well, you may be asking them for genetic information. You may be having them get their mouth swabbed or their nasal nose swabbed for these tests. Some of them may be taking blood tests for antibodies and stuff. Those are all something that's going to contain genetic information. And so we need to make sure if we are doing that, or if we're requiring that or administering that, that we're not violating the GINA Act. The Family Medical Leave Act came out last year with some additional changes specifically related to COVID. So we always need to keep the Family Medical Leave Act in the back of our mind. But most importantly, in my mind, always is personnel policies. We need to make sure we are documenting. What we have in writing is what we're doing in person. What we have in writing follows the rules and the laws. What we have in writing is based on something and it is applied consistently.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough the importance of having these personnel policies in place. So not just pulling something off the internet because you saw it on LegalZoom or you Googled it, or your friend who has a business across town, they use it, and so you're just copying what they're doing. Those aren't effective personnel policies. Your personnel policies need to be developed specifically for you, your business, your employees, and the type of customers or contact with the public that you have. I really can't stress enough that once we have these personnel policies written, approved, hopefully reviewed by some legal counsel, and put into place, that you actually provide copies to your employees, and that you have your employees acknowledge that they have gotten them, right? If they read them, if they don't, it doesn't matter, because you as the employer will be protected if they have acknowledged that they've read them. They can't come back later and say, well, I didn't read them, right? So with that background, and it dawns on me, I'm not sure if we actually know when people have questions.
They're going to try to send them through the message box.
Okay, great.
So we will slow down a minute to make sure there's no messages yet. Of course, we can always come back to a topic if we need to. And so our first main topic after that, no questions yet, is what to do before you know an employee is sick. So you have employees, obviously they're working for you. Sometimes you're side eyeing them saying, does he look like he has a fever? So when they call in sick, what is it that we can ask and what is it that we really can't ask?
So the rules are a little relaxed right now because of the pandemic, right? There's a national emergency. The federal government has declared that there's a pandemic. So different rules come into effect, right? So since we're in a pandemic, you are allowed to ask questions of your employees related to the COVID-19 symptoms, right? So you can ask your question, you can ask your employees, do you have a fever? Have you had a fever in the last 24 hours? Do you have a cough? Do you have chills? Do you have a temperature? You're absolutely entitled to ask those questions.
Well, why wouldn't I just ask, do you have COVID?
Because now we are asking about a medical diagnosis, right? So we can't ask, do you have COVID? We can't ask any medical related questions. Do you have cancer? Are you pregnant? You can't ask those things, but you can ask about the symptoms, right?
Wonderful. Wonderful. What about for a sick family member? So if somebody says, my spouse is sick, can you ask about their diagnosis?
No, we can't ask about family members. We can't ask, is your mother sick with COVID? We can't ask, is your husband sick with COVID? But what we can ask is, have you been exposed to anyone who may have symptoms of COVID-19? That's what you can ask your employees.
And that's clearly defined in the CDC. The CDC has some really great websites. We're going to post some websites at the end for resources for y'all. And that includes when should they test, what is considered a symptom. So those are the questions that you should ask. They have some sample questionnaires for you. So once we have...
Well, before you get to the next question. So I want to expand on that a little bit. Yes, the CDC has their guidelines. and you are absolutely entitled to rely on those guidelines. But COVID-19 is ever evolving. This is a new virus. The information that health officials and the government has on it changes all the time, right? You are allowed to ask about symptoms that your local health officials, so Guadalupe County, the state of Texas, let's say the health officials from this county and from the state of Texas have identified an additional symptom related to COVID-19, right? So for example, the loss of smell, right? You can ask about that too, right? It doesn't just have to be federal guidelines. You can also follow your county or state guidelines as to what the symptoms are. And as long as it came from health officials or a government, an official government statement, you can rely on that information and you can ask those questions without fear of violating any laws or rules.
That's awesome. So it's good to know that we can ask some questions, so we're not just going in blindly and having employees come and potentially infect other people. Other than questions, what can I do to screen my employees?
So because we're in a pandemic, you are absolutely entitled to take your employees' temperature as they come in. I think most of us now have been to a business where we showed up and they took your temperature and they asked, have you had any of the following symptoms? And they rattle them off real quickly. We say no, and then we go into the business. You can do that for your employees as well, right? You can take their temperature. You can ask them if they have a cough, if they've had a fever, any of the symptoms related to COVID-19. Absolutely.
So what if they refuse? What if they're like, I don't have that, that's just that made up disease?
You can't take my temperature, right?
Mine.
You as the employer, you are entitled then to send the employee home. You do not have to allow that employee into your work. Now, we're already 10, 11 months into this pandemic. I hope at this point that you as the employer have some sort of written policy, sent out an email to our employees that said, we will be taking your temperature when you come into work, and we're going to be asking if you've had any of these symptoms, right? So I hope you've done that beforehand, right? So they have a heads up, and you have made sure that you yourself are protected.
Wonderful, wonderful. And when I screen these people, I'm screening everybody, right? Anybody who comes in, I can screen my customers, I can screen my applicants if I'm trying to find new staff members.
Yes, if you have applicants coming in, let's say business is doing well, you're looking to hire some new applicants and you're bringing them in for interviews, absolutely. You can take their temperature, you can ask them about symptoms. If they refuse to give you their temperature, you don't have to interview them, you can ask them to leave. If they display any symptoms, you can absolutely ask them to leave, right? But with that, right, we are now 10, 11 months into this pandemic. I hope that you have updated your technology as it's evolved, right, over the last almost year now. There are other ways to screen applicants. There's online screening tools, and then there are video conferencing applications where you can interview these people without any physical contact. And most of these applications are free.
Wonderful. Can I require the employee to stay home? So I think they look a little shifty. They've got a fever. They seem to cough every time we're not near. Can I just say, go home, I'm not paying you?
You can send them home. They're displaying outward symptoms of COVID-19. You are entitled to send them home. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you have an employee who you suspect has been infected with COVID-19, you should let the other employees know that they may have been exposed to COVID-19, and you will give them time, or you encourage all of your employees to go get tested. Please keep in mind though that if it's been within 7 days, you should also sanitize the workplace and any workspace that employee has been in contact with. If it's been over 2 weeks, then any additional work on sanitizing is really not necessary because the time frame for infection from the droplets has passed, but it's still a good thing to do.
Sometimes it's just a morale thing. Make sure your employees know that you're concerned about them. So doing a little extra cleaning, even if it's not gonna, even if there's a very minimal chance of having an active virus or something that would make people sick. Sometimes just paying to get the building clean helps with morale because they feel like you're really paying attention to them.
Absolutely.
So once we do have that sick employee, who can I tell? You said I should notify their coworkers, but
so by notify coworkers, I am not saying that you should send out an email that says, John Smith has contracted COVID. He has notified us that he is positive for the virus, and anyone who has been in contact, close proximity or in contact with him should go get tested. You cannot do that, right? You cannot name the employee and you cannot name their medical condition. But what you can do is you can send out an email to your employees and say, we have reason to believe that you may have been exposed to the coronavirus. Please, if you're experiencing any symptoms, this is our policy related to COVID-19. You must report any symptoms to us immediately. And if you are displaying any symptoms, then stay home, right? You can do that. Now, the state of Texas, and I believe maybe the federal government too, to some extent, especially when dealing with federal employees, but the state of Texas is doing contact tracing, right? So once there's a positive COVID-19 test sent to the state will actually contact that positive person and ask them who they have been in contact with, right? If the state of Texas calls you as the employer to ask about this positive, do you have an employee who tested positive for the coronavirus? You can absolutely tell them yes, and you can give the name of the employee, and you can give the names of the employees who also you believe came in contact with that employee. So yes, the government, yes, we can disclose names and diagnoses to other employees, to customers. We cannot.
it's their private personal information.
Correct.
So here at the city of Cibolo, if we have a positive diagnosis, we send notification out to their immediate coworkers, anybody who would be in that 6-foot distance, and say that someone has contracted a contagious disease. And then for the rest of the staff, we do send a notice out saying we did have a positive case. You would have been contacted separately if we had any reason to believe you came into contact with them. We wait 72 hours, get a little time for that virus to incubate, 72 hours from the last time we saw that employee. And then after that, we strongly encourage the staff to go get a COVID test if they want. But it's just an encouragement. It is not a requirement. Not everybody likes having their nose be tested multiple times. So we do leave that up to the employee to make the decision, and we do continue to monitor for that. We do also have to keep in mind workers' comp. So when it comes to workers' compensation, it is really hard for anybody to determine where exactly somebody may be tested positive. So the safe bet is to talk to your individual insurance provider if you have one. Some of them want you to report right away. So we do like to send a report. They deny it most likely, but that way we just have on record that we did notify them. They're going to check and see if there was a specific moment in time that they would have been had an opportunity to contract it for work, but we'd rather send it and them deny it than not send it and it would have been covered. So we do file workers' comp for COVID positive employees if they don't know where they got it from. Now, obviously, if an employee comes back and says, I went to Disney World last week and now I was next to somebody who was coughing on the tram the whole time and now I'm sick, then obviously that's not a workers' comp issue. If they get it from a family member, sure. But if they say, I've just been here at work and I know so-and-so already had COVID, so I'm wondering if I got it from them, then we would actually file it for workers' comp. That moves us really into how do I get them back to work?
And real quick, because Kristen mentioned travel, right? So if you have an employee that you know that has traveled, right, and they're traveling during a pandemic, do you as the employer have to wait until the employee develops symptoms to ask where they have traveled? No. So questions about where that employee has traveled are not disability related questions. If the CDC or the state of Texas or any state has recommended that people who've traveled to certain locations stay home and quarantine, you can ask your employees if they have returned from that area, right? So you can do that, right? And even if the travel itself was personal, right? You as the employer can do that. Okay, but moving forward. All right.
How do I get them back to work?
So we're at this point now where you have an employee who has tested positive for the coronavirus. They've stayed home, right? And now they are ready to get back to work, right? You as the employer are entitled to ask for a doctor's note before they return to work, right? So long as this is in your personnel policies and this is something that you require, or maybe it's a new policy that you implemented because of the coronavirus, you realized that now is the time to have the policy, that's more than okay. It's just that once you've enacted that policy that you're applying it consistently, right? So I have my brother-in-law working for me, I know he's safe to come back from work, we're fine. You would still need to make sure that you are applying that personal policy to the brother-in-law as to the other non-related employees, right? But absolutely, you can ask for a doctor's note. Now, keep in mind though, and be as flexible as possible, because a lot of doctor's offices and the medical personnel in general are overwhelmed, right? So it might take some time to get documentation from a doctor. Maybe consider other forms of documentation,
That's a good point.
Yeah. A negative COVID-19 test, right?
If they're willing to share.
If they're willing to share it, let them know that that's something you might accept, but that really all depends on you and your business and what you're comfortable with. If you want a doctor's note, get a doctor's note. But if you're okay with some other form of verification that it's okay for the employee to come back to work, then let your employees know.
Wonderful. Now, what if they do test positive and they feel fine and they want to work? Can we provide any type of accommodations to let them work from home, to help them work from home?
Absolutely, right? So you have an employee who's tested positive, but they're fine, right? They're more than able to continue to work. You can absolutely offer some accommodations. And Kristen mentioned, letting them work from home. That's probably the safest, right? It keeps them the furthest away from everybody else. But maybe your particular type of business doesn't really allow for that, right? So let's say you have a restaurant, right? There is no way for you to allow your employees to work from home, right? But maybe if you can set it up to where, this employee who has tested positive, maybe they can work in the back somewhere, right? With appropriate, personal protection equipment, right? Have them do something like that, sweeping the parking lot, picking up trash, right? You can also accommodate that way. It doesn't always have to be working from home, but sometimes, right? Back to this example of a restaurant, you can't have that employee washing dishes. You can't have them stocking food. You can't have them cooking, right? If there really is no way to accommodate, right, then there is no way to accommodate.
So one of the ways that we know if there's an accommodation, we have to look to see if it's a reasonable accommodation, not just what the employee asks for. And then I'm going to provide you a great website if you're unfamiliar with it. It's called Ask Jan, ASKJAN, and that's the Job Accommodation Network. And it provides a lot of opportunities and examples of ways different illnesses and diagnoses can be accommodated. But before we ever accommodate, we have to go back and look at our job description. So we have to make sure we have a clear job description, which identifies all of the official duties, the essential duties, what they need to do their job. And so I'm going to post a website, ONET online, and that's going to help write job descriptions for you and talk about the different items for pre-existing job descriptions. So you have to have all your policies and everything line up. They are all dependent on each other for you to be able to build this shield of safety against lawyers, to be able to help protect your business and everything that you have worked for with that.
And to that point, absolutely, right? Kristen and I, we will stress personnel policies and job descriptions for everybody, not just because it's what you should do and it's a good idea, but ultimately these policies protect you as the employer, right? So if something happens to you, the employer, and you don't have these policies and procedures in place, you can lose your business, right? One good lawsuit will wipe you out, right? So these policies are there to protect you, right? And to protect your business, what you do to support your family and all of the employees that you support and all of their families, right? And all of their income. So these policies are important for a lot of reasons, right? They're nice, it's a good thing to do, but most importantly, it protects you.
Wonderful, thank you for adding that. If we have sent those people home, so if we did accommodate and let people work from home, what do we need to be concerned with? Is there anything specific that we should be worried about? We want to make sure we're still communicating with them.
Right. So just because they're working from home or some other remote location as an accommodation doesn't mean that the other laws don't also apply, right? So there are required notices that we have to put up in break rooms or in common employee areas. All of that, all of those posters, all of those mandated notices are all provided for free from the agency that are issuing the rules. One really good website is Texas Workforce. They provide a lot of posters. All of the federal agencies will provide PDF copies of all these notices that you're required to send out. You are absolutely entitled to send them by email, right? So create a document that you email out to all your employees quarterly, right? Or you email to an employee once you've made an accommodation for them to work from home, right? Mailing is fine as well.
Policy?
Put
it in your policy manual.
Yes.
So they have a copy of all the policies, right. And then you put all the posters and announcements in there, and they've signed that acknowledgement form.
Right.
And so you have proof that they have access to it and that they have seen it.
Right. Exactly.
I learned that from an attorney.
A very good attorney. Absolutely.
So yeah, you do want to maintain your communication. You do want to maintain your personal, your minimum requirements, like having those posters and stuff. You may still have to maintain accommodations there. So maybe they have a diagnosis that requires they work a different shift and they've been working a different shift at the office. They may still have to work that different shift at the house also.
And to that point, right? So I'd like to give an example about that, right?
We have a lot of good examples.
Yeah, we have tons of good examples for you guys. But let's say you have an employee whose responsibility is to answer phones or to answer the phone and to say, do your filing, right? But this employee happens to be in a highly susceptible, right? In one of those groups, highly susceptible to the coronavirus. Maybe the employee is pregnant, or maybe the employee has had chemotherapy or cancer treatments in the past that would make their immune system more susceptible to illnesses, right? Just because you've always had someone sitting at the front of the business answering phones doesn't mean that that's the way you have to continue it, right? You can absolutely accommodate a position like that by having the phone calls forwarded to a cell phone. And the employee can take those calls from anywhere, right? You can have the employee maybe come in after hours when other employees aren't typically there to do the filing or to clean or to organize, right? Whatever that employee's duties are, or ask if they're willing to come in on the weekends, right? Make up those hours on the weekends, right? This is the time to be creative. If this is a good employee, you really don't want to lose them, right? because right now, good employees are in high demand, and accommodating, making these small adjustments for an employee who is valuable to your company will go a long way. Not only you keep your business running, but now you have an employee who is appreciative that you worked with them, so they can continue to work.
And so that ties right into this last point, which is making sure remote workers, you're still paying attention to their morale. So you can still celebrate their accomplishments. You can have Teams meetings and announce awards, announce great accomplishments. So-and-so finished on this project. We're super proud of them. You can have, there's companies out there that send items to their house. So maybe, you send a breakfast taco to everybody's house and y'all have a morning meeting and get your morning meeting with breakfast like you used to do, like the good old days. We can always celebrate or find some fun way. Last month we did online bingo. We played online bingo. It wasn't very disruptive. We had some prizes that they won later, and it was just a nice way to include the employees and to make sure they're still getting a chance to see you face to face, to get a chance to talk to you, for you to express your appreciation, because everybody is stressed. Everybody is worried about their family and their health. They're worried about their pocketbooks. You're worried about your business and how you can maintain and your family and your health. And so everybody just needs to be a little kinder to each other and make sure we're paying a little extra attention and giving a few more smiles and virtual high fives. So make sure when you have remote workers that you don't just worry about the legal, but also worry about the morale issues too.
Exactly, right? Because at the end of this, we want our business to come out better, stronger, and more closely knit, right? You don't have to come up with all the ideas on how to keep morale high. Ask your employees for ideas. Ask them, what ideas do you have, or what ideas have you seen with other companies or with your family or friends on how their bosses kept morale high and how they kept everyone connected, right? It's all these ideas do not have to come from you, right? Engage your employees.
And they don't always have to cost money. Online bingo we did during lunchtime, so we didn't hurt anybody's working hours, and I think I spent about $20 on 3 awards. But you know what? They still talk about it. We had fun. It just gave us an opportunity to, from everybody's desk, still talk to each other and talk a little game.
I was not invited to this.
You were not invited to this bingo.
I am disappointed. I'm very disappointed.
So that is going to wrap up. Oh, no, I lied. We have one more topic that is just layoffs, and that's real quick. So say we have been trying to do everything right and it has gone south. We need to let some people go. What's the laws involved with letting people go? Has any of that changed with COVID?
None of that has changed with COVID. The laws are the laws, right? The WARN Act, and it's on the slide there, that covers employers who have at least 50 employees in any one location, and that location is going to suffer layoffs, right? The WARN Act, it's not very complicated. If you find yourself in that situation, find help. You can send me an email. I'll help you find an attorney who can help you transition your employees to a mass layoff. But what I will say, before you head that direction, okay, there are some federal programs available to everybody to help stave off mass layoffs, right? The government wants your employees to work. They want them earning income. There are 2 programs right now through the Small Business Administration. One of them is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which turns a small business loan, if you use so much of it for qualified business expenses, go to the website, it's all there. But it could even possibly turn from a loan to a grant. Look into that, right? It's a very simple application. You do it online, and the government has made it a very quick process, right? And releasing funds pretty quickly. The other program is the Paycheck Protection Program. The government opened up a second round of payment protection, paycheck protection, at the end of 2020. Banks are taking applications now. Call your banker, call your bank, go to your bank's website, see what you qualify for. This second round of PPP loans are geared directly for small businesses. And then the economic injury disaster loans are actually focused now on some of those businesses that operate in low income zip codes, right? So see if you have those resources available to you that might get you through the hump, right? And get you over this pandemic and recovered, right?
So now's your chance. You can type in some questions if you have anything specific about your situation that you want us to address. If not, I would really strongly recommend writing down Miss Adelita's email. She's available for questions. And anytime she will respond back, and if she can't help you, she will find somebody who can.
Absolutely.
Same with me. If you have any questions for me here at the city, I will happily help however I can or find somebody who can. And then we've added some of these resources that we spoke about, EEOC's website, the Ask Jan website, which is about job accommodations. So if somebody, COVID related or not, is asking for an accommodation, you need to make sure that just because they ask to be able to wear purple instead of pink, you may not have to follow the purple rule. Maybe they need to wear blue. So you need to really follow what the doctors are saying and what is a reasonable accommodation for your workplace. I've added ONET Online. ONET Online is going to provide a great resource for writing those job descriptions. We need to make sure we have those written job descriptions, that we review them occasionally, make sure they have all the information, because that's what the courts and lawyers are going to look at when they say you've discriminated or caused any problems, is where's that job description? How are we following it? I've added SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resources Management. This is a national organization. You can pay to be a member if you choose, but they provide a lot of questions and answers to keep you up to date on laws. They have sample policies and handbooks. You can ask them direct questions. They're very useful. And then we've added the Small Business Association's website also for any additional questions related to the economic
injury, disaster loans, and the Paycheck Protection Program grants/loans.
So we will wait a few minutes to see if there's any questions. If not, thank you so much for tuning in today and giving us a chance to be able to talk about COVID and its employment impact. We love our jobs, and we love to talk about these types of things and share our information with everybody. I want to thank the city of Cibolo for hosting this and providing this opportunity for you today also. So Dustin, Kelsey, anybody?
Any questions? I do want to thank Kristen for inviting me today, the city of Cibolo. I appreciate it. Small businesses and employees and protecting them is something that I focus my own personal business on. It's near and dear to my heart, and small businesses are important. They employ the most people, in the state of Texas. And so it's important that we keep these small businesses open and running, and give them all the resources they need to make sure they stay profitable, right, and keep their employees on the books.
Awesome. Well, if there's not anything else right now, we hope you have a great week and try to stay warm and dry and safe in this weather. Thank you so much for tuning in.